Give me 9 minutes and I'll give you the most direct route to 10% body fat I know, built from 14 years of training, 8,500 coaching sessions, and more mistakes than I'd care to admit. It's not a complicated plan or a new approach, just the specific things that actually matter and the stuff most people spend years on that doesn't. And in this video, I'll show you what 14 years of getting it wrong taught me about getting it right, why most people are further away from 10% body fat than they need to be, and the exact route I'd take if I was starting from scratch today. I've been a personal trainer for 11 years, and the clearest way I can show you this starts with the thing that most people spend the most time on. And to explain exactly what matters, I need to tell you what I spent years doing that didn't. So from 16 to around mid-20s, I trained consistently, showed up, put the work in, took it seriously, and despite genuinely showing up, I had almost nothing to show for it in terms of actually getting lean. Not because I wasn't trying, but because I was spending most of my effort on things that didn't actually move the needle. I followed loads of bulk and cut cycles that had me gaining body fat for months and then trying to strip it off again. I trained 6 days a week on complicated bro splits because that's what serious people did back then, or at least I thought they did. And I bought supplements that were supposed to make a difference. I switched programs every few weeks when the current one stopped feeling like it was working. I read everything, watched everything, tried everything. And here's what 8 years of all of that produced. I was in decent shape by most people's standards, but never actually lean or shredded. And here's the specific thing I figured out eventually after far too long. And it's embarrassingly simple once you actually look at it. I was optimizing the wrong things. Not doing nothing, doing plenty, but the things I was spending the most time and energy on were the ones that made the smallest difference. And the things that actually mattered, I was doing badly, inconsistently, or just not at all. And everything I'm going to cover is built in the free Softer Lean program linked in the description. It's the exact structure I wish I had around 14 years ago. And here's what those things actually are, because most people have never had it laid out this simply. So 14 years of training, 8,500 coaching sessions, and the things that consistently produce the result come down to 3. The first is being in a real deficit, not a perceived one, and not a Monday to Thursday deficit that quietly gets eaten back at the weekend, but an honest, tracked, consistent deficit across the full week. Most people who aren't getting lean, sorry to say it, but are not in one. Not because they're undisciplined, I mean some people are, but for a lot of people they aren't, but because they genuinely believe they are when the actual numbers tell a completely different story. For example, my client here, Jimmy, came to me after 4 years of trying to lose the same weight. Eating well Monday to Thursday, meals out and drinks at the weekend, completely unaware that Sunday evening I'd quietly cancelled everything the weekday had built. 4 years of that, fixed within just a couple of weeks once we actually saw what was happening. The calorie deficit was never real, and that was the whole problem. And the second thing is protein at every meal. Not obsessively counted forever, not complicated, just a meaningful amount at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Around 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight across the day. This manages hunger better than anything else I can think of, protects muscle while the fat comes down, and makes the whole thing significantly more manageable, trust me. Paddy, my client here, came to me with a supplement stack that cost more per month than most people spend on food, and he was missing his protein target almost all the time. So what we did is we dropped the complicated stuff, sorted his protein out, and in other words, we made sure he was eating it consistently, and he built muscle while getting leaner at the same time. Not because protein is magic, but because it's the foundation that makes everything work properly. And then moving on to the third is 3 full body sessions a week with progressive overload tracked every session, not 5 or 6 days, not a complicated split, just 3 sessions, all under an hour, where the weight you're tracking goes up every time, or the sets go up, or the reps go up. And that is progressive overload, doing a bit more than last time, which is what tells your body to hold on to muscle while the fat comes down and you're trying to get lean, and it keeps your body adapting rather than plateauing. And here's the thing most people find the hardest to accept when I lay this out this simply, and I know what you're thinking, that can't be all of it, but here's what I've watched play out hundreds if not thousands of times with clients. The people who get lean aren't the ones doing the most. They're the ones doing the 3 things consistently for long enough without switching to something else when the progress slows down. So here's the exact route I'd take if I was starting today. Because the principle is simple, but order actually does matter. And the first thing I'd do is an assessment week. 1 full week of tracking everything before changing anything. Not to judge what I find, just to understand the actual baseline, to see what my body was actually intaking. What am I really eating across a full week, including weekends? What does my training actually look like? Where's the gap between what I think is happening and what's actually happening? This is the step almost nobody takes. Most people start by changing everything immediately. New diet, new program, new approach, without ever understanding what the current week actually looks like. And without that baseline, everything built on top of that is just guesswork. And once the baseline is clear, the deficit comes from the actual maintenance number rather than a rough estimate, specific to the starting point and how quickly the goal needs to happen. Not so aggressive that muscle goes with the fat, I've definitely been there, but not so comfortable that nothing actually happens and you're not even losing body fat. Protein sorted across 3 meals from day 1, the same reliable meals most days for breakfast, lunch and dinner. For breakfast and lunch, for me specifically, as you'll know from my other videos, I always have protein nuts. I know what's in it, I know the macros, I know the calories, and it works. And it's convenient, and it's because decision fatigue is real. But dinner can be flexible with a normal social life that fits around it without derailing the whole week. 3 sessions a week built around the actual week rather than an ideal version of it. Whichever days work consistently, which specific days matter far less than just showing up across the week. And honestly, that's the whole thing. Assessment week, a worked out real deficit, protein at every meal, 3 sessions with progressive overload tracked. That's the 14 years pretty much distilled into the approach I'd use from day 1 if I was starting again today. But here's the bit that explains why most people are further from 10% body fat than they actually need to be, because it's genuinely not about effort or commitment. And I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you've struggled with it at least at some point in your life. It's about what they're spending the effort on. The fitness industry makes money by convincing people that results require complexity, more sessions, more supplements, more optimization, more switching between approaches when the current one stops feeling like it's working or isn't fun. But the person who genuinely wants to get lean follows all of that, spends years on it, and ends up in almost exactly the same place they started. I spent 8 years doing that. Most of my clients spent years doing it before they came to me too. And the moment the complicated stuff got stripped back and the 3 fundamentals got applied consistently, the results came way faster than any of the complicated approaches. Cash here, my client, he was in his late 30s, he had a demanding job, running his own business, was convinced getting lean required a level of commitment and complexity his life just didn't have room for. So what we did is we stripped it all back. We put him on 3 sessions a week, early in the morning before his family woke up. We sorted his nutrition, made it really simple around his work, and he never missed once. And he was in the best shape of his life at 39 before he turned 40 in just 12 weeks. And it wasn't because the approach was overly complicated, but because it was simple enough to actually sustain. Also, Sam, my client here, knew more about training and nutrition than most people I've ever coached for that matter. He'd consumed more content than most personal trainers and hadn't started because the right approach never quite felt clear enough to him. So what we did is we built around his actual week. And he saw results pretty much immediately once we got him on a proper structured program, which works for him. The knowledge part was never the problem. The simplicity to actually use it was, and the pattern is always the same. Complexity keeps people stuck, but simplicity gets them moving. And again, the Softer Lean program in the description is the simplest version of this I've ever built. 3 sessions a week, the nutrition framework, everything mapped out from day 1. It's completely free. So go get that today. So here's how I'd actually put this together on day 1 if I was starting from scratch. Because the order matters as much as the things themselves. The first week, I'd track everything to the T before changing a single thing. And it won't be forever, just long enough to see what's actually happening underneath versus what you think is happening. Most people skip this and spend months wondering why nothing's happening. But once the picture is clear, the calorie deficit comes from what the week actually shows rather than just a rough estimate. I'd sort protein across every single meal. I'd have the same reliable breakfast and lunch most days, which I know work for me, are convenient, I enjoy. It doesn't take long to prep and I don't need to think about it all the time. But I'd make sure dinner is flexible enough that normal life fits around it. So there is some variety in there. If you've seen my full days of eating, you will know this. And on the training side, I'd keep it to 3 sessions a week, which is what I do still right now, built around the actual week and your goal, not the ideal one. It'd be around 45 minutes max all full body sessions, but with movements which are optimized for my goal. 2 to 3 months of that done consistently, and you'll be somewhere most people spend years trying to get to. Not because the approach is clever, but because it's the right things done without stopping. And here's the specific thing that determines whether those 2 to 3 months actually produce the result or whether it just stalls out in the final phase, just when it should be working. Even with a real calorie deficit, the protein sorted, and the training consistent, a lot of people hit something in the final phase that they genuinely didn't see coming. Progress appears too slow right when it should be accelerating, the body feels like it's resisting, and most people change the approach at exactly the wrong moment. And there's one specific reason this happens. And understanding it before you get there is the difference between finishing the job and resetting back to the beginning for the 4th time in a row. And I've got a video that covers exactly what it is and why it catches almost everyone off guard. Somewhere over here, so watch it next.